Okay, I can talk about NFTs all day long, but since we only have an hour, we brought a very diverse group of panelists for you. So let's do the introductions first. And yeah, just give a brief intro of who you guys are and what is it that you do.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Robby Young. I'm the CEO of Animoca Brands. We are, as many of you know, a global mobile game publisher and developer based here actually in the Cyberport. So we're sort of the home team. And we've been concentrating a lot, particularly on blockchain games over the last 2 years, beginning with a relationship with Axiom Zen to publish CryptoKitties here in Greater China. And I guess since we caught the bug then, we haven't looked back, and we've been just trying to do everything we can to stick our fingers in as many pies as possible and evangelize blockchain games.
Hi, I'm Sandeep Nailwal. I am the co-founder and COO at Matic Network. Matic Network is a layer 2 scaling platform for blockchains, and we all know that the blockchains are not able to get blockchain games also specifically, if I talk about that, are not able to take or get the adoption that much because of the scalability and user experience issues. And we solve we believe that we solve a lot of those issues. And currently many top games are already moving on to Matic Network, looking at the benefits Matic offers, like for example Decentraland, chain breakers and all that, all are moving their technology stacks to Matic. So yeah, I would like to speak more about that.
My name is Atallah. I'm the CTO and co-founder of OpenSea, which is the biggest NFT marketplace. And we started working on it around the CryptoKitties boom at the end of 2017. And we've been focusing on the newest tech that we've been seeing emerge in the space and just helping developers build it into their games, acquire new audiences, get published, get liquidity, and making sure their ecosystems last as long as possible. And what excites us most is just the fact that these games are kind of attracting a new type of person into games, one who didn't really play games as much before, but is now just really excited about this economic game and ecosystem.
It's all a game. I'm Alex Amsel. I'm the co-founder of the Blockchain Game Alliance, or a co-founder. Basically, we're just trying to get anyone who's involved seriously within the games and blockchain environments, including people like some of the people like Loom and Matic and many of the game developers. What we're trying to do is just find common problems people have, work together to try and solve them, do some networking, and really just try and create an organization that can represent all of us as a group. Outside of that, I've been speaking about blockchain games for a few years, and I did the first talk about this whole thing at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco a few years ago.
Which year was that?
I don't know, 1986. But my real interest at the moment is around NFTs, how we can create real markets for them, for the community at large and for whales, and make them sustainable. So to that end, I share ownership with an Axie, with Gabby. Hello, Axie, my little advert. And I also own something called Baus, which is one of the first boss in Neon District. And I'm really interested in how, working with people like OpenSea and the game developers, we can create real markets for these items.
This is the only blockchain conference you'll go to where you'll see grown men on stage very proud of their plushies, right? All right, so I'll start with a question for Robby. Animoca has been around a long time, and you've been making mobile games, and particularly licensed ones for how many years now?
Licensed games for about 10 years.
Yeah, for about 10 years. So what was the aha moment for you that you needed to get into blockchain games and NFTs?
So I think for us, we saw a natural sort of collision between the world of blockchain games and the NFTs in specific, and what we did creating licensed games with our licensing partners, because it's all about that IP. And so we saw that if consumers have the ability to actually own a piece of IP themselves, because they can buy in-game characters and have sort of physical possession, if you will, that this would appeal to them, because one of the great sort of benefits of working with IP for us over the years has been that consumers, IP resonates with consumers. They love their favorite characters, and that's why they enjoy playing these games. And so if you can extend that enjoyment through the ability to have ownership of those assets, that's a no-brainer to us. Now, the more complicated part is then beginning to have those discussions with the licensors, because this is a completely sort of uncharted territory for them, and to explain to them that there is a virtual item that has a limited edition and a potentially endless lifespan is something that really requires a little out-of-the-box thinking on their part. So that is a bit of a learning curve for the licensors.
How do you deal with, I guess, the fear, the perception that once I sell it out there, I have zero control over this item? Does that question come up a lot with licensors?
Always comes up. And so we always make the merchandising analogy, because really what we're doing with NFTs is no different than what you do with plush toys. You can't control what people do with plush toys in the privacy of their own home. Just like you can't control what they do with their NFTs, right? I mean, obviously you can limit the usage of NFTs through smart contracts and place all kinds of restrictions on them if that's something a licensor would desire, but we try to explain to them that the more restrictions you put on it, then the less perceived value it may have to consumers, so it's a bit of a trade-off. And it's their choice, ultimately, as the licensor, how they'd like to proceed, but we think more open and is better in the long run.
Okay, I have a question for Alex Silituna, because we have two Alexes here. How do NFTs change game design? Because you've been making games for a long time. You've done a lot of indie games, PC, mobile games. So how does having an NFT kind of change the way people interact around the games?
Yeah, so the first thing, as I've been telling a few people here, is that having unique items and tradable items is not new. It's been available in a lot of games, and Steam as a whole platform are based around it. So to some extent, developers already know how to do it. The difference with NFTs from these existing platforms is suddenly they're on an open network instead of a closed network. So as a game designer, you have to really, really think about how to make that play to your advantage and in a way that doesn't damage your economy. And in fact, when Steam's secondary market first existed, a lot of games got it wrong, and they allowed people to buy the items, but at the same time as they were selling the first copy of the item, people could be trading their items. So what that did was force the price to zero, essentially. So you've got to really think about if you're going to have some of your items as tradable NFTs. NFTs don't have to be tradable. They can be linked to like a player profile or a user account. If you're going to have tradable NFTs, you need to think about how to model the scarcity around your game economy. I'm going to ignore the demand aspects for a second, but for example, designers should know now from all their experience with free-to-play and so on how to start doing the economic modeling for this, but it's amazing how people don't think about it in detail. So as a game designer, like the limited game design I've done myself, what I do is sit down with an NFT and I'd model out how can we create demand for this, where we sell out or give away even our first editions, and then create an environment where secondary sales can then take place, which I can then monetize, but which also empower my players to feel like they have more ownership of my game. It becomes as much their game as my game, where they can feel that there's that transparency and trust element that perhaps there isn't there in some games right now. You can see how many have been issued, you can see where they're owned, and you can see how many are moving around in the secondary marketplace. None of this happens in the current secondary marketplaces. In fact, what I find most fascinating about OpenSea out of everything is that I own stuff on OpenSea, and people can make an offer on my items at any time, and then people in the communities on Discord talk about it. Just sometimes it's a really low-ball offer, but sometimes it's a high offer, and people are going, will you accept it? And that just doesn't happen anywhere else.
Yeah, Alex and I bought an Axie together for 27 Ether, and every week I get emails for someone trying to buy it for 2 to 3 Ether. So I haven't sold it, just so you know. All right, so let's go to Sandeep. You're probably the most hardcore blockchain guy in this panel right now. So how did you fall into the world of blockchain games? And give us a little bit more about your background.
So, we've been researching, like we were developing a particular app on Twitter when we wanted to have, micropayment kind of solutions. And, back in 2016, 17, we realized that, there is no, mechanism over the fiat kind of channels. So that's when, we started gravitating towards, Bitcoins, and then realized that Bitcoins are not scalable. Then Ethereum came along, and then Ethereum scalability issues, and then we realized that, we heard about Plasma, that, Vitalik is coming out with this framework and all that, and then that brought us into Plasma, and then since then we have been into the research space. And then in 2018, we came out with the Matic network, which is a flavor of Plasma, Plasma, and it offers everything that Ethereum offers to you on a public sidechain with the security of the Plasma, right? So that's what offers game developers a lot of ease of development, as well as the guarantees of a blockchain, like the basic ethos of blockchain, like the ownership, security on the sidechain at much lower cost and much easier to development.
Okay, so I guess for more of the game developers who are still looking at blockchain here, like why do games need a sidechain in the first place? So like, what does it all mean?
Yeah, so above then sidechain, what we are essentially saying, sidechains are also layer 2, right? So so all the benefits of blockchain we talk about, like the ownership and the decentralization and the security and all that, that is there on a blockchain on layer 1, because there are trade-offs with scalability that have been taken so that everybody runs those computations on their computers. That's how you get all those security and benefits. Now, that essentially means that layer 1s, be it Bitcoin or be it Ethereum, the main platforms that we use, or be it any other which currently is saying that, other platforms which may be saying that they are very fast and, conducive for the development, if they have to remain decentralized and secured, as well as, ownership, like, conducive to that, they will always have to take those trade-offs. So that's why we talk about layer 2, that layer 1, we believe that in the long run is going to be a settlement layer, and then on layer 2 is where the computations, the fast computations, which is the requirement of the applications, will happen. So sidechains are a flavor of layer 2, and specifically for gaming, specifically for assets and all that, where you want to have ownership, but you don't want to pay too much of cost for the ownership and the transfers and all that. That's why you use sidechains. But let's say there are some games who want to use, or let's say want to have your gaming interactions also onto the blockchain, or that may be in many cases maybe overkill. But if you want to have that, then you should choose something like a state channel. For that, you won't use sidechains. So sidechains, state channels, these are all flavors of layer 2. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. So for Alex, OpenSea, how did it come about that you guys started offering a marketplace for NFTs? How did you all get started?
We got started by just talking to the gamers that were starting to come into the space. They seemed very different from the typical speculators we'd known in Telegram. And we saw a couple people get fraudulent or make fraudulent trades where they would like send the item and not get the full Ether payment back. Right. We saw lots of people try to clone CryptoKitties, and there's obviously no infrastructure for doing that back in the day. We saw a couple people make Magic the Gathering style blockchain card games. Some of them were really fun with like really cheap assets, but they had lots of problems marketing and lots of problems like getting an audience. Yeah. So we solved all three of these things kind of in the same place by building OpenSea, and we just focused on talking a lot to users and always being open-minded to new projects that we're seeing popping up.
What kind of trends are you seeing with developers now choosing to probably roll out their own marketplace or work with you guys? Are there a lot more people that want to go with a third-party marketplace, or are these coexisting with each other?
Yeah, good question. At the beginning, the biggest games like CryptoKitties and Decentraland did their own marketplaces, and that's still today where the majority of volume happens for those two projects. Now we're seeing a shift where games are putting a little bit more emphasis on their game and building the marketplace second, because they're realizing that in part due to the transparency and interoperability of blockchain, they can still get the same benefits by just leveraging what's already been built, like OpenSea. Also, our developer tools have gotten a lot better in the last year and a half, so it's just a lot easier to get set up and really fast.
What are the major features you've built out that have really driven more usage for the platform?
I think we saw a giant exponential spike in smart contracts on OpenSea after we built developer tutorials. Initially, we focused on just helping developers create smart contracts, and then we helped them create interesting kinds of metadata. The original ERC 721 spec for metadata is pretty bare bones, and consensus on adding to it is just, it's kind of a nightmare in GitHub comments. So we added some of our own ideas and just kind of like made that a part of the OpenSea spec and tutorial, and that and we basically based that on developer requests. We built support for ERC20 tokens as like bartering for making offers and for selling items for things other than Ether. And ERC20 tokens kind of excite like everyone who's got a holding of them. And then bundling, a lot of users really wanted to bundle assets together because it's just so hard to price things. Right. Like we can make complex AI to tell you what you should price your item, and people wouldn't believe it. The best thing is just giving users like lots of flexibility and creating interesting packages. And
right, so this is a CryptoKitty and a banana, and I want maybe some Tron and Ether for it, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to add that I think as we see more use of actual collections, which is a mechanic that's been criminally underused, I think, so far within NFTs, and I think that bundling and other aspects of OpenSea will become more game-like in their own right. People like to collect, but at the moment, if I want to view my generalized collections, I still go to OpenSea and I just see a list of stuff and I sort by tag. And so I'm quite looking forward to the time when actually you know things are in a set, and OpenSea should almost incentivize you to buy the set and complete the set. And that's something that I think we'll see from OpenSea, as well as from individual games. But people like to collect, they like to complete. I want to be able to advertise that I need this one item to complete a set and someone to offer it to me. And that Neon District has a sort of sets with the characters. Other games have sets of cards. We have sets of cars. You have car parts in your game, Gabby. So I want to see those actually really gamified.
We've seen some really successful auctions on OpenSea recently, and I want to highlight the one with F Formula 1. So how did that come about, and what was the thinking about doing the auction for the 111 car?
So I think one of the things, after we signed the license with F1, like many other games in the blockchain space, it obviously takes some time to produce the game itself, and we wanted to capitalize on some of the momentum we had around the publicity of signing the license initially to get users excited about the upcoming game and start to build some community, both on social media and through the website of the game itself. So we thought the best way to do that is to begin to auction off content, because maybe those auctions can be events in and of themselves to start to build a little bit of momentum around the brand. And so we've tried to work with F1 to promote that through their channels as well as through our own channels. And then obviously we're leveraging OpenSea's network for the auctions of those cars themselves. And thankfully people have been interested and they've supported the auctions quite successfully so far.
Did you see any spike in users after successful auctions like that, or something that really highlights the platform?
Yeah, one innovative thing that F1 Delta Time did with Animoca is they auctioned each car individually and one after the other, which puts just all the attention on one auction. Right. And they're eBay style auctions, so they're going to the highest bidder. A lot of people are like, wow, I can't afford $100,000, I'm out, but I'm just gonna sit here and watch and see it bump up. So we definitely see like good usage spikes around those types of focused auctions.
I just have a question for Animoca, I guess. Traditionally, game companies would choose not to use a site like OpenSea because it would take away like their audience. I'm interested in, I think it's a really good thing you guys did, and I'm interested in what your thinking was behind that. Was it about their community, about their tools, a combination?
I think it's a variety of things. It's community and tools, as you said, but it's also our approach towards being citizens of the blockchain game community, because we don't feel like this is a zero-sum game by any stretch. I mean, we're all just getting started, really. And so we think it's important, obviously, to support the ecosystem, because we feel like we will have a piece, a stake in everybody else's success as well. Because, frankly, we just want to attract the world to look more into blockchain games and play them. So the more we can all be successful, I think we'll share in that.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really important point because a fundamental difference between anyone working on blockchain games, if they really understand it, is that it only works if we're all working together to some extent. It doesn't mean we all have to be complete friends, but we're also not competing with each other. The point of blockchain is that it solves coordination problems. It means we can do things with each other's assets with or without each other's permission, subject to IP rights. It means that we all benefit by finding what people like about blockchains. It means we all benefit from using sites like OpenSea. But this contrasts quite a lot with a normal game developer, and this is my background as a regular game developer, where we release our game on Steam. I have my own private data. Steam own every other bit of data. And we're sitting completely outside of every other game, unless we maybe have some cooperative deal with another developer. But in this case, it's quite important to be aware of the other games that are going on and the other intellectual properties that are being used. As we're seeing from CryptoKitties, they're doing a lot of little deals everywhere. And I think it's important that this is how we differentiate ourselves, by being open to collaborations and cooperations.
And I think we have the exact same approach because our dream and our intention is that when people buy Formula One cars for F1 Delta time, hopefully they will be able to use those assets in other places. Because if they could just use it in our game, then there's really no benefit to having it on the blockchain.
CryptoKitty Formula One karting?
Exactly.
I'd like to see that.
One analogy that kind of comes to mind is back in the early days of the web, before Google AdSense, to get ads on other people's sites, you had to contact the owner of the website and just make an offer for like what you want to advertise and how much money you would pay them. And advertising is the biggest industry on the web, but sometimes it involves these really complex negotiations because there's no shared API. But now, like, your item and the value in the game, like, anyone can tap into it. Everyone has the API information for it. And like, you create your asset in one place and it'll show up on like 200.
I also, like Alex mentioned a very good point that, the blockchains promote the collaboration, open kind of collaboration and all. And that's what I also wanted to say that, when we talk about blockchain gamings, these ethos are very important for it. And, maybe 6 months or 1 year back, the solutions, because the blockchains were immensely costly and all that, the solutions to these, to get these attributes of the blockchain were very costly, right? So you would have Ethereum, which is very costly in the transaction and all that. But now, and then there came some solutions which offered low cost transactions and some bigger chains, and they, raised a lot of money and all that. But they essentially, to achieve speed and all that and low cost transactions, sacrificed on the basic ethos of the blockchain, like where you don't have enough decentralization, don't have enough security of the assets and all. People can freeze assets and this and that. So, but now you have emerging solutions where you can get all of the basic ethos of blockchain that are there, because every one of us is building a blockchain based game, and if we sacrifice on those fundamental ethos of the blockchain, then it kind of ruins the whole purpose. So now there are solutions which are actually offering these things at a much lower cost. Like, this is a Matic shill, but I'm just saying that all of those, ethos are available on layer 2 with all of the decentralization, security and everything at much lower cost. So that makes, it more conducive to build, things like applications like game. And that is what is giving, us a lot of right now adoption in terms of games.
Okay, open-ask question for everyone, because for the game developer there who's maybe building a game on Unity, the business models used to be really simple. Either it was a paid game, I get paid up front, multiply by number of units, and then I know how much I'm making. For free-to-play, it was much more complex, right? It was downloads, conversion rate, but people basically get paid via ads or in-app purchases. So what is the business model for blockchain games? I, as a game developer, how am I going to get rich from this? So where's the money being made?
May I? I don't see it as being fundamentally different from the world of free-to-play games, because free-to-play games also have a certain type of an economy inside the game, where you're trying to use different methodologies and engagement techniques to encourage people to spend money in the game. You want to make, the game is more fun if you spend money. That's part of the idea. And I think blockchain addresses that, because if we're talking about content ownership, you still have an economy in the game, And the idea of a marketplace and the evolving value of content, that's actually, I think, tangential to the core focus, which is just that you're still spending money in game and buying assets in games. And if you want to participate in the secondary market, you can do that, or you can just play the game, just like you would any other game, right? A blockchain game should not be different. It should just be fun to play, and you spend money in it. But there's this added benefit that if you want to trade content with somebody else, or you want to, grind away at the game for ages so that your content is potentially more valuable to sell later, then you have the flexibility to create those opportunities. When people ask me who are not familiar with this industry what I find most exciting, I actually think it's a very, very boring idea, which is that if people spend a certain amount of money in a game right now and have the opportunity to get some of it back at some point in time by essentially cashing in their chips, by trading their content to somebody else, maybe they'll spend more to begin with. That's it. That's all we're after.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I just want to step away from seeing everything as trading, especially if we're talking about NFTs. I think there's some other interesting economic experiments that could be done around NFTs, and which we're seeing in Decentraland and stuff like Axie around land, where you can actually have a new way of, let's say in World of Warcraft you tended to go grinding to get all your materials, and we've heard a talk earlier about people selling their accounts and so on. I think we're going to see some new models where people are actually almost working within the game, and I'm not really a fan of the play to earn phrase. I think it's a very, very small audience, but it could be an audience that's very important in some games. But what it's really doing is it's not so much about the earning potential. What you're really doing through these NFTs, whether they're tradable or not, is trying to create a more engaged audience, an audience who feel like they are more important to the game, especially that early audience. And that's not just financial. That's actually thinking, this is my stuff. And what I'm seeing, I recently spent a lot of time researching like all the current state of like 40 or 50 blockchain games, going through all the Discords and the Telegram groups. And the good ones have one thing in common. They have really fabulous Discord communities. And they're very well managed, they're very positive, and there are strong narratives that constantly happen to do with events in the game, to do with sales, but also to do with what people are, the stuff that people own, how they start decorating their characters, like if they do paintings of their characters. There's all this extra stuff around a form of UGC, but it's now not just doing a mod, it's doing other stuff around it. Even on these currently very tiny games, it would never normally get that kind of attention. So when players get attached, they get really attached. The question is, can we then take that to a wider audience?
It's kind of too early to back this up with evidence, but I hope that unlike free-to-play games, blockchain games last way longer. I think the longevity should be longer because even if the game dies and the original developer just shuts down the website, any indie developer can look at the number of owners for all those assets, can look at the total amount of value that was last spent, maybe at its peak, and be like, I could make a really cool thing. This is my addressable audience. This is the kind of value that used to go through here. There is hope for my little project. And those kinds of little projects, I think, grow exponentially as more people just learn how to do this. So I don't think it'll be. I think it's a big improvement over free to play. It's kind of like a federal government, like give up some of your taxes and give it to the states, so that the whole nation can last longer.
It's actually a little bit like running your own little country, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen anything interesting in NFTs that are not tied to games being traded on your platform?
Definitely. So I mentioned advertising earlier. Crypto voxels is kind of very similar to Decentraland, and it's very kind of hacky right now, where there are like one or two developers building out a scripting engine for you to see 3D plots and structures that show off projects. There's a parcel that shows off digital graffiti that artists are making. There's a couple parcels bought by a site called First Edition that's run by a VC that shows off digital art and a couple like exclusive game assets. And people are kind of like making their own builds and using this as like a way of getting multi-dimensional advertising.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think, and there's one more kind of NFT that Matic has pioneered in the Ethereum space, and that can, in future, like OpenSea can be a very can be a platform for exchanging those. And it is that so when you exit from the side chains, so to ensure the security and everything, the Plasma framework generally asks you to wait for a 7-day period, but that's a bad user experience. So what we did was that exit token becomes an NFT. And now that NFT can be traded, and say, for example, you are withdrawing 10 Ether worth of something, right, from there, and then you want to cash out that money very, very quickly, and you are ready to pay some interest on it. So, what you can do is that you can take that to a marketplace. So we already have some leading, decentralized finance lending providers who are, taking that NFT, let's say it's 10 Ether, they will give you back 9.9, and then that have 0.1 as a, interest for them, and after 1 week they can claim it back from the network.
That's actually pretty cool.
Something like that can also be, and you can like gamify it and whatnot, and then later on it can be traded. Yep.
Maybe we can use those things like a claim on money as NFT, then put it inside the game, right?
Yeah, pretty.
I think that whole decentralized finance angle is going to get really, really interesting because suddenly the stuff you've earned within the game just from playing it or that you've purchased, like you'll be able to find people, and I think there are plans to do this from some of the DeFi projects. You'll be able to actually use that as collateral to take loans out, or you'll be able to monetize that, and that's never been possible before. And you'll be able to do it really safely and without having to trust anyone, as long as you believe they conform to the protocol through the website. And so I think the leading decentralized finance products are going to find good ways to use NFTs in new ways, even from games. Maybe it's how people will make pocket money in future, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting proposition. Like somebody, if I'm owning X number of NFTs on OpenSea, and I can open an offer that, hey, I want to get some loan on that NFT for some time, and I'm ready to pay the interest. And that's what is happening with the DAI on a lot of platforms. So people put Ether as their collateral and get the DAI and pay the interest back, and it's booming right now.
All right, so we have a few minutes left. So now I'd like to open up for questions. So we have a very diverse group of panelists here. So yeah, please go ahead and ask your questions.
Does anyone have any questions? I mean, I want to ask. I actually want to challenge a question you were saying about the longevity of free-to-play games. I think that the reason I asked, I'm curious about this, is because I'm looking at Clash of Clans. That's been 5 years it's longer than that now. I mean, it's the best part of the last decade as #1 game almost. It's like when you look at that kind of scale, I don't think it's about the monetization model. I mean it's part of it, but I do kind of also have sympathy for your perspective on the potential for that long-term legacy of the asset. What I don't know is whether we can prove that yet. My fear is we can't actually prove that people are going to keep up the current assets and reuse them. I know lots of us want to do that. I know that's what we try to do with Reality Clash, but I don't know that other people are actually reusing other people's assets in their games. Am I wrong? Are people doing that already? Am I missing something?
Yeah, the interoperability so far has been pretty bare bones. And I think like if CryptoKitties had been made in a centralized way back in Neopets days, like a year and a half would have been a decent, long time to last. But I think like with Clash of Clans, I think part of the reason it's lasted a long time is because it's sort of a step towards a blockchain game in that users create their own tournaments and are monetizing kind of their own mini games within a game. Same with Roblox. Users create their own games, and the top grossing game on Roblox is making like $3 million a year for a 17-year-old kid. That kind of stuff, I think, is a lot more powerful if one company is not burdened with all the work for it.
Oh, and so you could argue the YouTube model kind of opened up a secondary market where people who were playing Minecraft could actually generate an income for themselves. And so in some ways, that ability to leverage the game as an experience for a different audience, I think, is I mean, maybe that's kind of the connecting factor between a blockchain and those other experiences, is that there's a secondary outlet for revenue. Is that maybe a fair argument?
Second being like there are other developers making money and the game is a platform.
There are other ways of making money outside the framework of the specific game. I mean, Robby, what do you think?
I would have said actually that, and this is parroting what my colleague Yat said in an earlier presentation, that it's more about, with NFTs, the content becoming the platform, because, and this is where we took our lead, frankly, from the CryptoKitties guys, because that was where the aha light bulb went off in our heads as game developers. Hey, there are all these people who own cats, and they want to do other things with cats, so why don't we make something, right? And then, now we are 2 years later, and we've invested in 20 companies.
I was going to say, this is really about this is another area of interest, is how you create value in NFTs again. Because the value of in an NFT really should come from more than just that one product from the one developer. Now, it may well come from the community, it may well come from trading on OpenSea, but the fact is that, let's use, what's the big crowdfunded space game?
Star Citizen.
Star Citizen. So Star Citizen is like it's a very up and down, fun. It's a game that's had a lot of criticism because of the way it's been developed. But they've sold spaceships for vast amounts of money. Now, I think that's an example of a case where if something really went terminally wrong, which it could kind of do any time it feels, there's definitely, if that was all blockchain based, there will definitely be companies that pick that up and make it work. So it's not like any of your NFTs are going to be usable again, and it's not that free-to-play games or any other kind of game can't have have a lot of longevity. But any game which has a strong following but fails, then the modders, in inverted commas, will take over and they'll find some other use. Or the other similar games will try and draw that audience to them.
Didn't someone bring Meridian 59 back at one point? I seem to remember that the community brought that back, which was like the first ever visual role-playing game. Anyway, sorry, I'm sure my age. I mean, actually, one of the things that influenced the way I designed the token system, the weapons for Reality Clash, was actually a card game called Battles in Time that they did in the UK with Doctor Who. And one of the key things with that was there was a set variety of stats that could be used to play different versions of the game. And they had a magazine which produced each week a new way to play with the same cards. And so it was a quintessential part of how I spent time thinking about the design of that weapon, so that the stats could be reused by other people. But I don't know how, I mean, are people genuinely taking the time to do that, or is that...
Yes.
Yeah.
The Koto Wars, is that correct? I think it's Koto Wars, which is reusing CryptoKitties, and you can take your CryptoKitties, it remaps the genetics, and then you can battle with them.
Perfect.
That's one example. I've come across a couple, and I'm looking at some ideas in that space as well. So I think it's just because it's very early days. But I think if you Google Koto Wars, there's a really big Medium post about their experience of doing this. And so I think you are going to see these remixes appear. And Axie's got some similar stuff, but it's a bit more basic. But yeah, I think we're going to see these remixes appear, and they're going to combine assets from different games in different ways. And just like, say, people are making games on Roblox, well, people will make their own games. They'll just use Unity or they'll use some web environment. But yeah, I think it will happen. But bear in mind that the number of gamers that we have playing these games is tiny right now. So for someone to do remixing, like they're trying to get the same gamers to play, because there's such a limited pool, it's going to take time.
That's why the Blockchain Cutie guys are doing their own version of that by taking their assets and applying new game mechanics for those same assets. And I think that's a kind of very smart way to seed it. In fact, I was trying to get Tony Reality Clash to run hackathons to reuse the game assets. That's not happened yet, though. Sorry, I'm hogging the questions. Anyone wants to raise something? Or are you all very hungry? There's a question over there. I'll come over with a microphone for you.
Hi, I have a question for Matic network. So a lot of the apps nowadays are just like gambling. So like Chombe, like EOS does. Are they? Do you think that the apps are classified as blockchain games, and how do you see these apps, and what's your opinion about that?
I couldn't really listen to. Did you get the question?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. Okay. A lot of the apps nowadays they're all about the gambling and all about like EOS does and Chombe does. Are the apps classified as blockchain games, and how do you guys think about the apps?
Okay, so you are saying that the large number of games that are being built around gambling, and you are asking whether that will be, is this...
What's your opinion? What's your opinion about this blockchain game?
What's the what's the question? What is the USP about these games you're asking?
Yeah.
Like the unique selling proposition. So, I think still didn't get your question. What did you say? What about these games? What is your opinion? Okay. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So see, like blockchain is still most of the people consider like many of the cryptocurrencies as values, and then on the especially on the Asian side of the world, people I've heard that people love gambling, and then these games are providing an easier and anonymized route to play these games. So that's why gambling in gaming is really big. And we are even seeing protocols now that are being built. So there's a company called Bet Protocol, which is building SDK where you can very simply use some APIs. You don't even have to know much about blockchain, and you can create your blockchain gaming game over there. Yeah. So yeah, that's the part. But I also wanted to make a just a closing comment. First we can complete the question, or maybe I just...
Cool. I'll let that please have his fingers here.
Hi, my name is Vladimir, Blockchain Cuties. I will throw some shit on the fan right now about the asset interoperability. Well, actually, don't you think it's a bit of a gimmicky thing? Because from technical perspective right now, in terms of decentralization and storing the value on blockchain, it's not really happening, because you can't map all the metadata so that it would be usable in all the games, because when you create something, when you create the data structure, you can do it only as a developer with your private key. And then the only one how you can reuse it, this asset, is either you copy this asset in your game and add something of your own, or you store it as a server data. And then guys like OpenSea can't take it. They need to work with your API. All the wallets, they can't share with their users this like new added metadata. So basically all the people are talking about that, but like I think it's not happening really, not yet. And if we're going further and trying to speak about like mapping the same data on different blockchains. For example, you play like EOS Knights and you have your knight as like a CryptoKitty, is not even possible as well, also because of the transactions per second speed. Because all the system, all the mapping will work with the speed of the slowest blockchain. So don't you think it's just like a hyped thing people like to talk about right now, and nobody is really thinking on making like a great business proposition out of that?
Oh, I think that this is partly just a time issue. I mean, we don't really have... We've had the first wave of games, and most of them have been rubbish. We're now into the second wave of games we're starting to see, which are much better quality, but the technology, like Matic, for example, is very new. The technology is still really immature. And as you say, if you're storing some metadata on one server with a custom API, then your game might be on 3 different blockchains, and there's issues with that. I think this is just a problem that we have to accept is down to technology. So is it being hyped? I think sometimes it gets overhyped. The idea of a magic sword in one game being a magic sword in another game, it's kind of fun, but I don't think it's that useful. But I think the idea of modding stuff is much more interesting. Yeah. And I think that's where it gets more interesting. And I think you can do that even now. But it needs an audience. It needs an audience to really become sustainable. So that we have to bear in mind.
Yeah. And also we blockchain at times maximalist kind of people, they want everything to be on blockchain. Like I personally think that only the relevant data needs to be on a strong blockchain. The other data can still stay in your servers. Like for example, asset ownerships, for example, your tokens and whatnot, those can, like the game items and all that, where you need to ensure the ownerships and everything, that should be on blockchain. The other things like the gaming interactions and all, you have some technologies, like I mentioned earlier in my comment, is that you have state channels. If you want to have every like game interaction or metadata also on blockchain between the game developer and the end user, so that he has the provability, you use state channels for that. You don't need an on-chain storage of that data. That will make the blockchain very bloated, and then again it will lose the the basic ethos and the values that it is offering.
I think we also got to make a distinction between game-to-game interoperability and game-to-website interoperability. When, I think one of the Mythical guys told me that there were 5 different Call of Duty game studios that were all making different schemas and metadata for assets in the same game, and even those 5 studios couldn't get operability to happen in the same game. Game-to-game interoperability is really hard. Game-to-website interoperability is not as hard because websites are way easier. If there's a metadata change, like OpenSea will try to figure it out. Your app might break if there's like a removal of something, but we'll try to help you with that. And then the website updates, and suddenly like the assets are still being advertised in 200 places.
And on interoperability also, I don't remember the name of the company, but one company is actually working on some blockchain standards, like the NFT and the gaming interoperability standards. If something like that picks up, and it will be a one man standing game, like the one product standing game. And if one standard at the end emerges out in 4 or 5 years, and all the game developers are developing on it, then I think it will be slowly it will evolve into a standard which may be slightly interoperable. But that seems like humanly, like right now, very improbable. But if that happens, there will be.
Whenever I hear people talk about one standard to rule them all, I go back to my phobia of Java and what I'd now call write once, run nowhere. But enough of that. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, so
I'm afraid we're gonna.
I just wanted to add a closing comment on that, because we talked about the blockchain ethos and the decentralization, security, and ownership, specifically for the bigger games who expect a large audience to come to their blockchains. A large number of your initial audience will come from the blockchain field, and if many of the gaming companies are like, they have to use some of the tools or some of the the solutions which are not decentralized and secure enough. I think personally, and that's my submission, is that once you start hitting a certain number of users, like your community will come back and ask for those things. So that's why I strongly urge especially the larger teams to think about, because they are building a blockchain game, so they should give some due importance to these characteristics. And now you have solutions which provide you the user experience, low cost gaming transactions, while ensuring all the decentralization, security in it. So that's one important thing that all the big games specifically should consider right now. Yeah.
And at that point, I'm afraid I'm going to have to close because we've got to go to lunch. Obviously, please feel free to talk to the guys as you go to lunch. Guys, thank you very much. Gary, thank you very much for hosting that. Round of applause for those guys.